On February 11, 2008, Maxie boarded a bus to save a buck, headed for Center City to get a haircut, and that was the beginning of the end, the prelude to his demise, as I say. He got the haircut at the beauty school, went next door to the dollar store, picked up 3 items, walked down the street to wait for the bus to take him home. He boarded the bus, and according to my father, the driver was agitated. He didn't wait for him to be seated. Maxie fell, broke his hip, and had a heart attack. No one will ever know what came first, the heart attack or the broken hip. Fortunately, he had taken enough homeopathic remedies to keep him in good health over the years. The surgeons were afraid to do a hip replacement for fear he would die on the table from the anesthesia. So they did a trauma patch job, installed 3 screws to hold what remained of his broken hip. As a result of the break in the hip and the trauma patch job, Maxie lost several inches off his leg. But he was a fighter. As far as his heart problems in the 90s, Maxie had a heart catheterization, was told that if he didn't have bypass surgery, he wouldn't leave the hospital alive. Maxie took the results, findings of the heart blockage, etc., sketched his heart on paper, and here he was 20 years later without the bypass surgery, still functioning. And this is the sketch I'm talking about of Maxie's heart that he did when he went home. And the wonderful doctor said that, if he didn't have the bypass surgery, he wouldn't make it home. He lived alone for 17 years after my mother Evelyn died, cooking, cleaning, inventing different breakthrough contraptions, shopping, driving, all alone in a 3-story house, surviving without surgery. So here we are again, listening to the so-called orthodox doctors saying that if Dad doesn't have a pacemaker installed in his chest, he will die. My father's longtime physician, Dr. Maxie, a homeopathic physician in London, England, who had served as one of Queen Elizabeth's physicians, said absolutely no pacemaker. The doctors tried to fill my father with all different dangerous heart medications. One time, his pressure, which normally ran low, dropped dangerously, causing him to almost die. They had him in such a catatonic stage. They filled him with so much horrifying medicine, he doesn't even remember one moment of that month when he was hospitalized. So I vowed to myself that I would wait this one out and stay by my father's side to protect him from further experiments. I gave Daddy arnica montana, 30, 2 times a day, along with 1 daily dose of guanoinum, 30, once a day. These are the remedies I'm talking about. These and this. One is a form of nitroglycerin, which is for the heart. And arnica is the most healing remedy on the universe. It's for bruises and bleeding, etc. You can get this at basically all your health food stores and grocery stores. The hospital was so annoyed with me for giving him the remedies that they gave me a bed to sleep in, because every 20 minutes Daddy asked for ice water, and I was the only one that would do it for him, give it to him. And I would walk home to shower and return. While at the hospital, I noticed lots of unsanitary things going on, like water dripping from under the sink, flowing on the floor. God forbid at this point, if my father had been able to walk, he would have slipped, broken his other hip, back and legs. The trash was rarely emptied, and I, being anal about cleanliness, emptied the trash bags, tied them up, and noticed mold at the bottom of the empty baskets. Every trash can in his room, 4 to be exact, had mold in them. The leaking water pipes were rusty. I called the head of maintenance, told them they needed to replace and repair the pipes and leaks. Also, the room next door had to be emptied out, for the patient had water dripping on his person from a leak from above. Actually, maintenance tried to replace disintegrating, damaged ceiling tiles over my father's bed while he was lying there, and I warned them they better not while he was in that bed. And we have witnesses to all this. The day after the trauma surgery, a physical therapist came in and said to Mr. Sarnoff, "We're here to get you out of bed and moving. You are only permitted 50% weight bearing on your right leg." Dad did that fine. Next day, another therapist came in telling Dad it was okay to do 100% weight bearing on the right leg. I wonder what the hell was going on here. 98 years old, trauma patch job to his hip, and it's okay to do 100% weight bearing? I conferred with Dr. Deacon in London, and we both agreed that Maxie would be better off recuperating at home with private caregivers and private physical therapists, plus a visiting nurse twice a week. With all this in place, we're on our way to recovering at Dad's apartment. Of course, I remained there all the time. The first group of caregivers at $16 per hour were quite interesting. When I went down to do my father's laundry, upon my return, one girl was stuffing cans of Coke, ginger ale, cookies, gloves, and bottled water in her backpack. I fired her on the spot, called her boss, and asked for a replacement. This time, they sent a gentleman who sat in my father's reclining chair receiving phone calls all night on his cell phone, placing some kind of bets, etc. One night, let's call him Jack, arrived at the apartment, made himself a salad, put his favorite TV show on, gave my dad a few spoons of soup, and began eating. The only privacy afforded me was my dad's bathroom, so I called my sister, began chatting, and down went a loud crash. My father had a large studio apartment. I opened the door, and Jack was sprawled out cold on the floor. I screamed to my sister on the other end of my cell phone, told her to come over immediately. I called 911. I was frightened. Jack did not respond to my calling his name 4 times. Meanwhile, my father was screaming, "Who the fuck is the caregiver, me or him?" The paramedics, fire department, and police arrived. And we have witnesses. I mean, this can all be checked out. They got Jack stirring. He was a diabetic, negligent with his insulin, and passed out as a result. The paramedics waited and made sure that Jack took the proper dosage of insulin and said he was fine to remain and to be left alone with my dad. And me, of course. I was scared to death. What kind of caregivers and what kind of agencies are these? They're supposed to do criminal checks and health exams. What would have happened to my father had I not been there? You tell me, what would have happened to him? So I called around and found another agency at $22 per hour. The physical therapist was giving my father exercises that I felt were too strenuous for a 98-year-old man. She suggested that I not be around during the treatment. I discussed all this with our doctor in London. He still felt that home care would be far superior to facility care, especially due to my father's age. But my sister felt my father would benefit by going to this private pay facility in Wynwood, Pennsylvania. Incidentally, this facility was $7,500 private pay per week. $7,500. We placed my father in this physical therapy facility. The physical therapist was great. Everything else was disgusting. They placed mouse traps all over the room. The patients could trip them just transferring from the bed to the commode. One Sunday afternoon, my father's left foot was dangling off the bed, and I noticed his large toe had a reddish-brown mark on it. So I called in the RN and asked her to please check my dad for pressure points that are often not caught in time that turn into bed sores. All the while, the $22 per hour caregiver that we brought along with us to this facility is stuffing her face with cookies sent to my dad. The private caregiver, who was employed to change my father's diapers and sponge him, was left with mud on her face. When the RN turned my father on his side to check his back and buttocks for bed sores, I had the RN come in because I had noticed his toe, had that brownish spot on it. She discovered paper towels stuffed between my father's ass with feces on the paper. This is very graphic. I want people to be aware of what does and does not go on, the care that should be administered to our families and our loved ones. So I fired her on the spot in front of the RN, my sister, my father's roommate, and family. Who can you trust to care for you? No one. I fired this latest caregivers agency and had a family review with the physical therapist after 2 weeks, and they felt that our dad had reached his potential and was ready to go home. My sister told me about this wonderful assisted living facility on the main line. She said she had friends whose parents had lived and died there. My sister and I drove over to the place that looked lovely, just like a Cape Cod beach house, like in the movies. Lovely dining room, table, linens, nice china, fresh flowers, but oh, what horrors we learned later on. My sister and I signed a contract and furnished Dad's small studio apartment. It looked great. I prepared a shadow box to be hung outside his room, which is customary for new residents, and they hung a nameplate, Maxie the first week. There were 2 caregivers assigned to shower my dad in his bathroom, and my dad was very private and very independent. They told my father to remove both his diamond and turquoise rings from his fingers. I was against my father wearing or even having them with him. but I gave in because these rings were a part of him, and this was to be his new and final home. One of the caregivers placed his rings on the nightstand next to his bed, and when they wheeled him out of the shower to his bed, the diamond ring was gone. My father called me